trust our phones, our locks, and our cameras to keep us safe. But what happens when the very tools designed to protect us become the eyes of the people hunting us? In this video, I am sharing 3 true stories where the technology didn't fail. It was used against the owner. The last story involves a detail so subtle you probably wouldn't notice it until it was too late. These aren't creepypastas. These are accounts from delivery drivers, night shift workers, and people just like you who thought they were alone. I have combed through hundreds of reports to find the 3 that are statistically most likely to happen to you. Our first story comes from a delivery driver who learned that sometimes the GPS leads you exactly where someone else wants you to go. I turned 17 just a couple of months ago and decided to get a job as a delivery driver for a local pizza joint just to get some money and have some work experience. It seemed like one of the easier jobs, better than standing around behind a counter being bored all day. Every night sort of felt the same though, driving the same routes, delivering to the same houses. Only the weekends felt different because we delivered until 2 in the morning. This was a Saturday, and there was a decent-sized storm overhead, which meant people didn't want to go out, so they had more incentive to order delivery. It stayed very busy until around midnight, when it finally died off, and I actually had time to walk into the shop and take a break. I never really had anyone to talk to, though. All the other guys were older, in their 30s or 40s, so when the next order came in, they sent me out to deliver it, even though the other driver had been hanging around doing nothing for an hour. I took the order and got in my car. It was to a street name I didn't recognize, but the GPS said it was 20 minutes away. I figured I would drop it off, then take the long way back just to kill time. The neighborhood this house was in was pretty standard, mostly wooded houses set far back in the trees with long driveways, nothing too secluded for our town, but compared to most homes, these would seem way out there. I turned down the driveway and parked at the end in front of the house. It was a large, older home with not a single light on. As I was getting the pizza ready, I saw a curtain move upstairs, like someone had just been watching me out the window. I see that a lot, actually, while doing deliveries, but this time it felt a little more creepy because I couldn't actually see them since it was so dark in there. I got out anyway and started walking up to the porch and was quickly confused. There was another box left right on the porch, a pizza box from a different local shop that I had only heard of a few times before. I didn't see any cars leaving the driveway or even in the neighborhood as I pulled in, so it must have been there for a while, which was weird because the box looked soggy, like all the moisture in the air from the rain had seeped into it already. I stepped around it and knocked on the door. I needed the payment, so I couldn't just drop off the pizza. I heard something shift in the house as soon as I knocked, and then it went quiet. I didn't hear anything for a whole minute, and then I knocked again. This time it stayed quiet. I knew someone was in there, so after a minute, I pulled my phone out and called the number on the order. A few seconds later, I heard a phone ringing inside the house. It sounded like it was just on the other side of the door, like someone was standing right behind it. But still, no one opened up. I was very confused because I knew I had seen someone looking from the window upstairs, and now with the phone, surely someone was in there. I was starting to get a really uncomfortable and eerie feeling. I thought about just leaving the pizza on top of the other one and leaving, when suddenly a voice called out from just behind the front door, telling me the door was broken and to bring it around to the side porch. It was a woman's voice, but it had a harsh, gravelly sound to it. I took a couple of steps back, then walked around the house. There wasn't an overhang on the side, so I had to walk through the rain with nothing to keep me or the pizza dry. Around the house, there was a side door that looked really worn and unused. If the other door really was broken, wouldn't this one look like it had been used? There were cobwebs and dirt all over it, and the outdoor light above it wasn't even working. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, already getting soaked. I didn't hear anything inside the house, though. No footsteps coming up to the door or anything. I started looking around, getting an intense feeling that something was watching me. I could barely see anything without the house lights on. This feeling grew worse over the next 30 seconds, and I just knew something was seriously wrong. I dropped the pizza box and made a run for my car, getting in and leaving right away. During the drive back to work, I thought the other pizza box on the porch might have been the other delivery guy, having had something similar happen. He probably knew better or had seen something else that told him to just get out of there. So with whatever plan those people had not working out with the first delivery guy, they had to order again from a different pizza shop. Clearly, they didn't care about the pizza, leaving it out there on the porch despite being home. The only problem is, I just can't figure out what the plan really was. My best theory is that she wasn't alone. Someone else was there, maybe out in the trees, and bringing me to the side of the house would ensure there were no witnesses to whatever was going to happen next. Our next account comes from the graveyard shift at a 24-hour gym, proving that high-definition cameras don't just capture security, they capture madness. I had gotten my first job at a 24-hour gym a few years ago. I was in a gap year, so I worked a lot of night shifts. The gym was accessed by keycard only, meaning often there were only 1 or 2 employees working. People could just check in, use the equipment, and leave the whole facility pretty much managed itself. All entries, exits, and usage of equipment was processed digitally, so all I had to really do was sit in the office and keep an eye on the cameras. It was around 2 in the morning when I had already done multiple rounds around the building and finished all routine paperwork. I was exhausted, so I just figured I would sit down for a bit and monitor the cameras. Everything was normal at first. Not many people come in to work out in the middle of the night, but there were a couple of regulars who came and went. I first noticed him when I saw him using a treadmill in the far corner. Normally, this wouldn't catch my attention as we have new guests from time to time. However, what really caught me off guard was how fast this man was running. I pulled up his treadmill number in the system where I am able to live monitor all equipment activity. He was running 9 miles per hour, which was impressive already, but what really shocked me was the fact that he never stopped. 10 minutes went by, then 15. He never slowed or stopped. I looked closer at the camera, and this man was nothing short of unsettling. He was wearing ragged clothes, he had long, messy hair, and his face never moved once. He was just staring straight forward. Then I noticed his feet. He was barefoot. He had been running 9 miles per hour for 15 minutes barefoot, just staring into the distance. At this point, I was very weirded out, especially since he was now the only person in the building besides myself. I pulled myself together and realized that we do have a policy requiring shoes, so I decided I would use that as an excuse to go talk to him, although his appearance really freaked me out. I got up the courage to leave the office and head out to talk to him. The machine he was on was located almost directly outside the employee hallway, and as soon as I turned that corner, my heart stopped. The treadmill was covered in blood. His feet were tearing apart as he ran. Blood was not only dripping but splattering from his feet and ankles for every step he took. His face was still stone cold, staring straight ahead. His mouth was wide open as he ran. He looked like he was on every drug on the planet. I yelled at him to stop, but he didn't say a word or even turn his head. He just continued to sprint and stare forward with his mouth open. I yelled again, something along the lines of, "Hello? What are you doing?" He then muttered the words, "Are you there?" in the coldest, raspiest voice I have ever heard. He wasn't out of breath or even panting as he spoke. I told him to stop a few more times, and he repeatedly just said, "Are you there?" The pool of blood at the end of the conveyor was growing, and at this point I just figured I would call the cops. I went back to the office, picked up my phone, but before I called, I glanced at the monitors again. He was staring directly at the camera, sprinting, bleeding, mouth open, staring at the camera. I turned away and then heard him screaming from outside the door. He wasn't even screaming words, just screaming at the top of his lungs as he stared at me through the camera. Suddenly, he hopped off the treadmill. He didn't even turn it off, and he sprinted out of view of the camera. I immediately started clicking through the feed, searching for him, but he was out of view of every camera we had in the building. I had checked every camera except one, the employee hallway. Sure enough, there he was, about 6 feet from the office door, just standing there. I don't even know how he had gotten into this hallway without a key card, but I didn't hesitate to quickly lock the door. Almost 5 seconds after I locked it, the doorknob rattled. Now I was calling the cops. He started screaming again and shaking the door as I explained to dispatch what was happening. They told me police were 5 minutes out. I just waited in the corner of the office while this man was trying to get inside. His scream was terrifying. It was so deep it barely sounded human, and he kept it up for an unbelievably long time. This went on for about 3 minutes. I thought if he got in here, I was going to die, and I felt absolutely helpless. Suddenly, though, the screaming stopped, and the door didn't move. I checked the cameras again, and he was gone. I couldn't see him anywhere. Eventually, the police arrived, and I made them search the entire place before I would even leave the office. They told me he was nowhere to be found. I quit the next day and have not entered that gym since. Our final story is the most disturbing of all because it didn't happen over a single night. It happened over a decade, proving that sometimes the people watching us are playing the long game. Since I was maybe 3 or 4, my family lived in a 3-story home in a relatively nice area. If you were picturing the quintessential suburban neighborhood, you've got the right idea. As for the layout of the house, this is all you need to know. My bedroom, which is on the 2nd floor, has a window that faces the street, and the only window in my dad's home office, which is on the 3rd floor, also faces the street. That is it.
The reason I am sharing this is because after the events of last week, I am now 100% convinced something sinister is happening to my family, and if I am connecting the dots correctly, it has been going on for years. The first relevant thing happened at least 10 years ago. My dad is a lawyer and often works into the night. According to him, he was working away at his desk at around midnight when he noticed a Chevy Suburban drive down the street at like 5 miles per hour. He claims to this day that the car looked like it was crawling down the street, as if someone had taken their foot off both the gas and the brake and was just letting the car idle forward. My dad didn't think much of it until he saw the exact same car drive back down the street, only this time in the opposite direction. And then, even more strangely, the car actually parked across the street right in front of our house. My dad didn't take his eye off the car for a good few minutes straight, waiting to see whether someone would get out or if it would drive off, but neither happened. The car just sat there. When he woke up around 5:30, the car was still there in the exact same spot. What happened while he was asleep remains a mystery, but my dad said he was so shocked to see the car still there when he woke up, he thought he was dreaming. The car ended up leaving before sunrise. Fast forward a few years, I was 15, making beats in my room, when something from outside my bedroom window caught my eye. It was a little flicker of light, definitely unnatural. I diverted my attention to the window and saw the strangest, most unsettling thing. There was a squadron of cars, at least 3 of them, driving down the street at a slow speed. That by itself doesn't sound so bad, but I quickly realized that the people in the cars were shining flashlights at houses. I kept watching in a state of confused angst as whoever was in the first car swept their flashlight beam across the house next to mine. Then they started shining their light at my house, and I actually ducked down underneath my windowsill when I realized the beam was about to sweep right past my window. Not 2 seconds after ducking down, I watched the flashlight beam illuminate my ceiling for a couple seconds before everything went dark again. A couple years later, while doing some landscaping in our backyard, one of the contractors my dad had hired claimed to have found a small hidden camera tucked into one of the bushes near the fence. It was tiny, no bigger than a car key, but it was definitely a camera. It was battery-powered, and the battery had long since died. It didn't have a SIM card inside, which meant it wasn't storing anything locally, but that didn't rule out the possibility that it had been streaming footage to an external device nearby while it was active. My dad said the most likely explanation was that someone had been parked close enough to receive a live feed until the battery gave out. Why anyone would go through the trouble of hiding something like that on our property and then just leave it behind was a complete mystery to us. We all just kind of moved on with our lives until our immediate next-door neighbors moved away and their house was re-inhabited super quickly by a youngish couple with no children. On several occasions after they moved in, I caught them looking into our yard through their top-floor window, always at strange hours, either really early in the morning or really late at night. One night, while walking my dog on the street, I couldn't help but notice my neighbors in their kitchen through their big bay window. They were sitting at a table, and for the first time since they had moved in, there was a third person with them. The guy had really distinctive features. He was fully bald, really muscular, and had the thickest eyebrows I had ever seen. The three of them were just sitting and talking at the table, nothing unusual, but as if they noticed me looking, the woman swiftly walked over to the window and pulled the curtains over it. She didn't actually look out the window at me, none of them did, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she shut the curtains because somehow she knew I was watching. Either way, I didn't forget about the man that had been with them. A few weeks ago, my family took a trip to Paris. A few days into the trip, we were at this random bar. Everyone was there, me, my parents, my brother, his girlfriend, and her parents. I was maybe halfway through my drink, zoning out of the conversation, when I happened to glance across the room. There was this guy sitting alone in a booth, just casually sipping his drink and looking around the room. Something about him seemed familiar, but I couldn't immediately place where I had seen him before. But then, like a light switch had been turned on, I realized it was that man who I had seen at my neighbor's kitchen table years ago.
There was no way I didn't want to believe it. What were the chances this random guy from my neighborhood would be in the exact same bar as my family, in a foreign country no less? I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence, but the more I stared, the more certain I became that it was him. Then he caught me looking at him. We locked eyes for what felt like forever, but was probably only a few seconds. He knew I knew, and he knew I knew. I could feel it. Then, without finishing his drink or paying his bill, he got up and walked out of sight. A few days later, we were doing some typical touristy stuff. It was broad daylight and we were just walking around the city when I saw him again, that same guy. He was standing maybe 50 feet from us, snapping pictures with a professional-looking camera. I couldn't tell for sure, but it kind of seemed like the camera was pointed in our direction, even though there was a famous monument behind us. I watched as he then turned a corner and disappeared out of sight. I finally told my parents about what was going on, and my dad checked as much security footage as was stored back home, but didn't find anything. I really don't know what to make of all of this. I don't know what these people want from us or who they even are, but now I am convinced they have been watching us for over a decade, which sounds insane, and I only have reason to believe things are going to escalate from here. The scary part isn't that these people got away. It is that in every single story, the victim ignored the first gut feeling because they wanted to be polite or logical. If you have a story where technology turned on you, send it to the email in the description. And tonight, maybe check your router logs.